Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our speakers. Today's program is Careers in New York State Government, and it is sponsored by the New Lawyer Institute at the New York City Bar Association. I am Mary Walsh Fitzpatrick. I am the Assistant Dean of the Career and Professional Development Center at Albany Law School. And I am delighted today to welcome our guests. Before we introduce our guests, I just want to start with a very short poll to find out who is joining us today. So if you wouldn't mind, let us know if you are a law student, a recent graduate, a professional with experience, or other, so we can get a sense of who's in the audience. And we'll leave this poll up for maybe about a minute. Okay, nice. So we have 25% law students, 25% recent grads, and 38% with professional experience, 13% other. Great, wonderful range. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kevin, for launching that poll. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today's program. And I'm going to start with Christopher Riano. Christopher, can you give us a little bit about your background as well as your current role and employer?
Absolutely. So it's so wonderful to be here today and to see everybody. And it's a real honor to be on a panel with such other distinguished members of the legal profession who are all coming to us today from different parts of New York State government. My name is Christopher Riano. I am the previous general counsel for the New York State Liquor Authority, a previous assistant counsel to the governor for education, constitutional law, and arts. I currently am a commissioner on the Gaming Commission, and I also previously served as an administrative law judge at the state level for 2 different state agencies. So I'm really looking forward to having a chance to talk a little bit about my own experience today and give a little bit of background and context to some of the opportunities that exist within New York State government.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Christopher. Abigail Sardino, can you give us a little bit of your background and current role and employer?
So I went to law school a little bit later, and prior to law school, I had a career as an investigator in the private sector, about 12 years, I think, doing investigating work. And then I went to law school, and upon graduating from law school, I worked for a very small boutique law firm in upstate New York for about 4 years. And then I got appointed to my current position, which is investigative counsel for the Division of Investigations within the State Comptroller's Office. And I've been there for a little over 2 years.
Thanks, Abigail. Abbe Ross.
Hi, Mary, thanks for letting me be here. I partnered with Mary and her team at Albany Law School regularly in my position as Director of Legal Recruitment for the Attorney General's Office. So I've been with the Attorney General's Office for 10 years now in various capacities, and I'd always been involved with recruitment, and I started full-time with the legal recruitment team in 2015 and was promoted to Director of Legal Recruitment in 2019. So before that, I worked for a number of campaigns and in politics around the country, and that segued to the career that I have in state government currently. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abbe, for being here. And Candace Williamson, can you give us a little bit about your background and your current role?
Sure. So I'm a 2018 graduate from Albany Law School. I started in state government right after law school through the Excelsior Fellowship program. And through that program, I worked for an agency and now currently work for the Executive Chamber as the Assistant Special Counsel for Public Integrity.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Candace. Okay, so to get us started and to set the stage a little bit, because careers in New York state government is a very broad topic. And so, Christopher, can you give us a little bit of an overview around the different branches of New York state government where one might start a legal career, and sort of focus us in a little bit today on where we are, which happens to be sort of the executive branch?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that. And I think one of the great things that's so exciting to have this particular panel together today is you literally have folks from various different parts of state government here who can talk to the different experiences that each of us have had. And in particular, having come myself as a law firm partner in private practice into state government when I started in state government, a lot of this can make very little sense until you really get in and start to think through the structure of state government, which is very unique in New York. Then I want to start right from the get-go. Yes, New York is just like you learned in constitutional law class. We have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. All of them have lots of lawyers. There's lots of career opportunities in each. There are lots of council positions, particularly in Albany, that work directly with various members of the state Senate. There are fellowships there, and as well as with the Assembly. I'm not going to talk too much about that because that's a lot of not my experience myself. And obviously, people clerk for the various different judges in the judicial branch. So that's always an option too. There's lots of available law clerkships and they're constantly being posted. But we're going to focus a little bit on the executive because the executive is kind of unique because there are 4 statewide elected officials. You have Abbe's boss, big boss. You have the Attorney General, who is independently elected. You have Abigail's big boss, the Comptroller, who is independently elected. And you have Candace and I's big bosses, the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor, who are independently elected. So that actually is really important, I think, for this conversation today, because each of us has had a very different experience entering into state government. Candace went through one of the most incredible programs ever, and I know she's going to want to talk about the Excelsior Fellowship program. It is an excellent program for younger attorneys to really catapult one's career and end up in very high-level positions very early on. But I think it's really important to think through how that 4 independently elected official structure functions when it comes specifically outside of the Comptroller's office and the Attorney General's office. The executive and the executive chamber is its own unique little ecosystem. So for example, each of my positions has been appointed by the governor technically. The general counsels of each agency are appointed through counsel's office. The head of each agency, whether it's an executive director like at the Justice Center or a commissioner like at OPWDD, are appointed through the governor's office. There's a lot of appointed positions. I know we're going to talk about civil service as well a little later. But all of those heads of executive agencies are appointed through the governor. Many of them go through Senate confirmation. So my role in the Gaming Commission is a Senate confirmed role. So I think in the big picture, when we're talking about how you get a career in New York State government and how that can look, the experiences that we've all had are different. So I want to set that tone early because I think that's important to note from the get-go, because each office is different and does have different structures and does look at recruitment a little bit differently. And I think with that, we want to start with the Attorney General's office, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So now we're going to turn. Actually, I'm going to pivot here and I want to follow up on something that you said, Christopher, because I think it's really interesting. In your career, you have moved through various positions. And I wonder if you just want to give us a little bit more background sort of on that trajectory before we move to the next topic.
Sure. And I'll be the first to say that I was the salmon that swam the wrong direction compared to most of my colleagues. most of the time, and I'm sure Candace would say the same, if you are in the executive chamber and you're part of the governor's staff, you end up going to an agency at some point or another, usually within a portfolio or some sort of specialty area. So most of my former assistant counsel colleagues or special counsel colleagues go from the executive chamber out into the world of agency land. I did this a little different. I went from agency land into the chamber because I found it very, very interesting what was happening, and I wanted an opportunity presented itself to take advantage of that. But the more traditional path for younger attorneys especially is something like the Excelsior Fellowship program, which is just incredible. Some of the best lawyers I've ever met have gone through that program. And you end up in these positions of really incredible authority. I think that's something that I can most certainly say younger attorneys, older, more seasoned attorneys, the opportunities that exist in state government are incredible, especially because you can obviously fulfill legal roles, right? And every single state agency has large legal offices to do all of the legal work. But there are many, many, many lawyers who are appointed as the head of agencies who don't necessarily fill legal roles or strictly legal roles. And I think in many ways, I can even just think of the Gaming Commission and my fellow commissioners. Some of us are lawyers, some of us are not. And I think that actually is really incredible to see. And then, of course, different roles come with different responsibilities. So, for example, obviously, being counsel to the state liquor authority is full-time. Being a full-time plus, I will say. Being assistant counsel to the governor is full-time plus as well. Being a commissioner is often per diem. So it is not my full-time position, and quite the opposite. It's a per diem position that comes up maybe one time a month. So there are lots of different options and opportunities that can exist to use one's legal acumen and career to be involved in state government. And I think it's a very rewarding opportunities because you are serving the people of our state and you serve them at some of the highest levels that one can. And I think hopefully that helped kind of give a little bit more color, Mary, to the kind of that landscape and the fact that my own career was a little bit sideways compared to how most people do it.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and so now turning to Abbe Ross, with your many years of experience in your recruiting capacity with the Attorney General's office, I'm hoping that you can start by giving us sort of an overview of the organization of that office.
Sure.
Okay, let's start there.
Sure. So the Attorney General is the chief legal officer for the state. So she's in charge of protecting the citizens, organizations, natural resources of the state. So she engages in both affirmative litigation as well as defensive litigation on behalf of the state. So that's important when you're understanding how the office is organized. So the office has 6 main legal divisions. One is similar to the others. I count it as a division when I think of it, but we have a state counsel division that does all the defensive work for the state. So we have a litigation bureau, claims bureau, civil recoveries bureau. Those are the types of bureaus. Social justice, economic justice, criminal justice. And we also have, I know I'm forgetting one, we have regional affairs, which are regional offices. So the office is organized this way. We have divisions, and then within those divisions, we have bureaus. And so the way to understand who does what is it's very indicative of the name. We have a charities bureau that looks into charities filings and regulates that piece. We have a civil rights bureau that looks into those issues, labor bureau. So the best way to get a sense of our office, because it is so large, I always tell people is to take a look at our website and also our press releases, because it will give you a sense of what bureaus are involved and what matters. And in many instances, we have bureaus that work together on matters. So the regional offices are throughout the state because we're a statewide agency. So they're from Buffalo, Binghamton, Watertown, out onto Long Island, including we have 2 in New York City and Brooklyn and Harlem. And then we also have executive offices in New York City and Albany. And those are our largest offices. So the New York City office is the largest office. We have about 900 people who work there. And Albany is the second largest with about 500 people. And in total, we're an agency of about 1,800 to 1,850 people. And of that, about 700 are made up of attorneys, and the remainder are made up of legal support positions and professional positions. So that includes the Attorney General's executive team, which she appoints when she comes in, as well as the division that I'm part of, which is the administrative division, which is a non-legal division that in effect runs the business of the organization. So think IT, human resources, which is what part of my unit's part of human resources. Budget, we have our own budget team. So we are kind of the backbone of the office. So it's a very large organization, and I think it's interesting because of the amount of work that we're able to do and the impact that we have in the state. And I think if there's something going on in the news, it's a matter of time before our office is either going to be involved in it or doing something to lead the way on it. So that's just a really brief overview of the office and the structure.
That's very helpful, Abbe. Thank you. 700 attorneys is a significant employer, right, in terms of state government. So I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind letting me know, there are pathways into the Attorney General's office, right? Can you talk to me a little bit about, the difference between coming into the office as a brand new law school graduate and how one might be able to do that versus coming into the office with several years of professional experience and how that might look?
Sure. So we just announced this fall a fellowship program, the AG's fellowship program. And so that is a pathway for law graduates to enter the office. So prior to that, we didn't really have an entry point into the office for recent graduates outside of those who wanted to volunteer or who perhaps had fellowship funding from law schools, organizations such as Justice Catalyst or Equal Justice. Or Justice Works, excuse me. So this program is a 2-year fellowship. The selected fellows which are 6, will be placed in specific divisions or regional offices to do work, but they will also receive training, and they will receive, we have an attorney that we're going to be hiring to run the program. So that person will be mentoring them and ensuring that their experience is sufficient that they can leave, finish the fellowship, and be qualified to be a good candidate for either a position in our office or externally. So at the end of the 2-year fellowship, they get priority consideration for positions with our office. So that's a great program. Actually, the deadline just closed the 29th of October, and we're in the process of selecting fellows. And fellows receive a salary, a competitive salary, as well as full benefits, the same benefits that all employees receive. And then in terms of if we have attorneys who have experience, the majority of our full-time positions require a minimum of 2 years of postgraduate practice experience. So the best way to find out what a specific position is going to require, because it does tend to vary by position, is to look at the job postings. And we have attorneys who come to us through a variety of different paths. We have attorneys who have worked in private practice and they're ready to return, or their goal was always to engage, have a career in the public sector, and they needed to earn some money or they wanted to have some experience, because we do not hire directly out of law school at this point. And so they come to us that way. We have people who come to us via judicial clerkships. We have people who've done other public service careers and who this is the Attorney General's is just the next step. So perhaps from a DA's office. So a variety of different avenues is how people arrive at careers here at the office.
What would you say, if you can answer this, what would you say that sweet spot is in terms of number of years of experience?
I would say usually 3 to 5 seems to be the sweet spot.
Okay.
And unfortunately, that can be a hard time for somebody who has been in private practice, I think, to make the segue, because it's usually around that time that they're thinking about, do I want to have a family? Do I want to do, are there something else personally that I'm trying to accomplish? And sometimes we're, choosing a government career, the salary is never going to be what you could make in private practice. So I think that when you're thinking about a career in the government, and I think this is true for everyone who's a panelist. I mean, there have to be different motivators. And so I think it's important when you're thinking about your career, what's important to you and, you know, what motivates you in your career. And those, you know, you need to be clear about what those are for you, and then figure out how to map a career around that, I think is very helpful.
I agree. Do you find that many of your candidates are taking advantage of the public loan forgiveness, the public service loan forgiveness program?
I think that many do. I'm not sure how many ultimately do, but I know that it's something that is available that can help. You know, one of the things in state service that's helpful is, you know, we do get cost of living adjustments. There's a STEP program within our office to help attorneys continue moving forward based on performance. So there are ways to keep moving forward in your career. And of course, there are opportunities, leadership opportunities that become available periodically. As well, there are opportunities to transfer. So in COVID times, we've seen people wanting to leave the city in some instances and work in some of our other offices. So it's great having a statewide agency because you could work, say you want to come to Albany where it's less expensive to live from the city. So that's another benefit, I think, of our office.
Great. And we had one question, Abbe, that I will ask you now. Are LLM students eligible to apply for the fellowship program?
So they are eligible if they're US citizens. So the public officers law requires that attorneys be US citizens. So if they are US citizens, then yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Abigail, turning to you for the second office of government officers that are directly elected, the comptroller's office. Can you give us a little bit of information about the makeup of your office?
Sure. So as you and Christopher both noted, the comptroller is one of 4 elected government officers of the state, and the current one is Thomas DiNapoli. He's been in office since 2007. It's the same, I think, term. I believe it's on the same term schedule as the governor. It's a 4-year term. As the state comptroller, he's the state chief fiscal officer. So he ensures that state and local governments are using taxpayer money appropriately, effectively. He reviews state contracts. We conduct audits of state government, state agencies, and local governments. And the local government auditing part of our office includes obviously local governments, so city, state, or city, village, town governments, and then school districts as well, and fire districts. He reports on the state finances. He's the sole trustee of the New York State Common Retirement Fund and administers the New York State and local retirement system pension for public employees. Also maintains the state's accounting system, and that includes administering the payroll for the state. And similar to what Abbe was saying about the AG's office, we're structured similarly in that we have an office in Albany, but our Albany office is more our bigger headquarters office. And then we have an office in Manhattan, and we have 8 regional offices and across the state. And those 8 regional offices those are pretty much our local government auditors who cover, like a region will cover approximately 8 counties. And then again, similar to the AG's office, we're split up into divisions, but then we only have really like one legal services division. Our divisions, I mean, there's many, but I would say the main ones are the retirement system, payroll, our unclaimed funds, pension investments, and then our audit divisions, which are, like I said, local government, state accountability, and our state government accountability. And then the legal division is a little bit different than the AG's office, but I think it's similar to a lot of state agencies in that our legal division is somewhat divided similarly to our agency as a whole, in that if you work for the legal division, you could be an attorney that focuses just on retirement issues or just on local government issues. So, and then I work for the Division of Investigations, which is within the Comptroller's office as well. It's a separate division, but it's under currently our counsel to the Comptroller is the head of the Legal Services Division and the Division of Investigations. And so our division looks into fraud and corruption relating to state funds, taxpayer money, and in addition to the head counsel to the Comptroller who heads that division, we have 3 attorneys, including myself, who give guidance to our investigative staff and facilitate prosecution of those cases.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Abigail, for that overview. It sounds to me like working for the Comptroller's office could be a really interesting place for anyone who's interested in financial crimes or financial regulations. A business background sounds like it could be a really interesting fit for the type of work you're doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I never really had an interest in that stuff, but the small law firm I worked for previously was matrimonial law. And in doing that, I did enjoy looking at like financials and digging deep into it. And I liked that part of it. So I do enjoy that part of it. I work with, our division is made up of investigators and also forensic auditors who, you know, get consumed by bank records and do, you know, a huge analysis on where the money is going, basically. And it's very interesting.
It sounds it. So talk to me a little bit about sort of the same thing that I asked Abbe Ross from the AG's office, which is so if you are a new graduate, what are the pathways into the Comptroller's office? And if you're a professional with some experience, what are the lateral positions that you might look for?
So I think the main like entry level type of position is similar to other state agencies, which is getting on the civil service eligible list, which the entry level position is you would go into the legal specialties program. And there's they call it an exam, but really the legal specialties exam isn't so much of it's not like you go somewhere and take an exam. It's you pay the application fee, you make out an application, you mail it in, they send you a bubble sheet, and then you bubble in, it's not questions like a test, it's more of, it's broken up into like your experience and your education. And so you get scored pretty much based on what kind of classes you took, maybe in school or your prior experience, whether it's legal internships you had during law school or prior to law school. So you just do that at home and mail it back in, and then you get put on the eligible list, and they'll notify you that you're on the list. And then you start getting what's called canvas letters from various agencies, that from there you just basically apply for that job. The difference, it's a little bit different than, you know, say another a person in another title going into civil service where they take an exam and they get one score for that exam. For the legal specialties, you score differently based on the position and the agency. So you can even score for two different positions within the same agency, you could score differently. Because when say a position is open within the comptroller's office for the entry-level senior attorney position, that the person doing the opening with civil service will fill in a bubble sheet based on what credentials they're looking for that position. And then however you match up with that is your score. So I believe there are, for the legal specialties exam, there's trainee positions that are prior to being admitted as an attorney. So you can get in to state government that way through when, you can start as early as 2 months before you graduate. You can do the application process and get on the list. And I would suggest getting on the list as soon as you can. And even if you're not sure you want to work in state government, just because you're on it, then you don't have to get on it quickly and hurry up to get on it if you want to get a certain position. And you'll be getting Canvas letters and you can respond or not respond. It's, so it's just another option. But I think that's pretty much how you would kind of get your foot in the door with any state agency. Those with experience who have, so I still got in at the senior attorney level with 4 years of experience. And then from there, I would have to take another exam for the next level up. And then it's kind of dependent on whether you're union represented or not. And I believe the first two grades, 25 and 28, are PEF represented positions. And then if you want to move up from there, you would move out of being represented by a union and you'd be considered management confidential. And so then there's a little bit higher positions that you can get hired into that you don't have to take an exam for. And those are the positions that I would assume people coming in with many years of experience would probably go into a management confidential position that you don't have to take a test for.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that. And you mentioned your position was not through that legal specialties exam because you were coming in with 4 years of experience.
Well, so it's a little confusing. So the position I got hired into was senior attorney, which is a civil service position, but it wasn't, I technically actually wasn't hired off the eligible list because I wasn't my position is not a competitive position. So most senior attorney, I think, positions are competitive, meaning you have to be hired off of, the applicant has to take and pass an exam, a civil service exam. For the non-competitive position, an applicant's qualifications are evaluated without an exam. So because of the confidential nature of my position, it was a non-competitive position. I would say the downfall of that, the downside of that is that from a non-competitive, when I'm even if I'm in a senior attorney position, from a non-competitive, I can't transfer to a competitive position and I can't take the next test up. So I'm in the process right now of getting into a competitive slot so that I can take the next, or, advance in my agency.
That is really helpful insider information, Abigail. Thank you very much for sharing that. it's a distinction worth noting for anyone looking for a job within New York State government. So now I will turn to Candace. Candace, can you tell us a little bit about your experience both with the Excelsior Fellowship program and subsequent, and how that impacted your career trajectory thus far?
Sure. So, like I said before, my entry to state government was through the Excelsior Fellowship, and that's a program that you start applying for when you're still a student. So you're placed into an agency, and you work with the attorneys in that agency in whatever capacity you're placed in. I started out with the Justice Center. It's a 2-year placement. I started out with the Justice Center for the protection of people with special needs, and I worked with the attorneys there. It was a very unique opportunity because it's one of the newer agencies, and I say new because 2013, and in your mind you might not think it's new, but we don't typically have agencies just forming. So it was one of the newer agencies, and there were opportunities to get into litigation there at the agency, which is also a rarity in state government, unless you work for the AG. So I got kind of an interesting view at what it takes to build an agency, how you work out the kinks in that agency, and tackle bad news stories, which was interesting. But also I learned the nuances in litigation. So at the Justice Center, I worked in the appeals unit, and we had hearings in front of an administrative law judge. So we weren't bound by the rules of evidence, which is very interesting too. You come from law school and you think everything is about hearsay and all these other rules, but not in that world. So that was interesting. And from the Justice Center, I went on to the FOIL unit within the executive chamber, which is now being reworked under Governor Hochul. But there I had a portfolio. So every attorney in the FOIL department kind of played a role as a liaison between agencies and senior staff, assistant counsels to the governor. And there we would take the FOILs that the agency got. FOIL is the Freedom of Information Law, and it gives the public a right to access records that are kept within agencies. So we would help the agencies in handling their difficult FOILs and kind of present it and get advice on how to proceed from assistant counsels to the governor. And the lawyering there was kind of analyzing the public officers law, which lays out a bunch of exemptions and exceptions to giving over those records, and putting those side by side with whatever the requester was asking for, and finding a way to get them the information that they needed, but also not impacting any ongoing litigation on it or anything that the agency was dealing with. So that was another interesting area for a young attorney to be exploring. And then from there, I joined the public integrity team. My team handles or oversees the vetting process for those who come into contact with the governor or who sit on commissions or on boards. I also, with that team, we oversaw investigations pertaining to the chamber and senior officials. And that's really what we do. Is there more that you want me to say about?
That's great. That's a great overview, Candace. I appreciate it very much. I think what you pointed out very successfully is the knowledge that and understanding that one gains about the nuances, right, of the organizations of state, the organization of state government. And it is extremely nuanced. And I think for anyone who's not familiar and is looking to work in New York state government, that provides incredible insight into the many different roles one can play depending on where they land up. And so I want to follow up, Christopher, with a question for you, if possible. Can you distinguish what's the difference between an agency and an authority and a commission?
Okay, I can do my very best.
Okay.
And I think one thing that I hope everybody took from what Candace mentioned is Candace, you just graduated in 2018, is that right? And now Candace is working at the very top of state government. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I think I just want to emphasize is that there are really incredible opportunities early on in one's legal career that exist in state government that are very, very exciting and interesting. And having been an administrative law judge at the Justice Center, so I know what Candace is talking about because I was an ALJ there, the things you get to learn are really extraordinary early on. And so I think, Mary, kind of circling back to your question about why are there commissions and authorities and all of these other funky different types of state agencies is a historical relic of the way in which government has been structured over the years. And let me just give an example. So as Candace mentioned, she worked at the Justice Center. The Justice Center has a single executive director. It's, I think, the only maybe executive director in state government. I'm not aware of somebody else with that title. But it is a one-person, top of the pyramid agency that, because it's very new, and you're right, 2013, the statute was created to give it much more of a pseudo corporate structure. When they put that together, you can go then all the way back to when the State Liquor Authority was put into place in the 1930s, and it was made an authority because there are 3 commissioners, there's a chairman and 2 other commissioners, and they together act when it comes to various different things that come before the liquor authority, and applications and questions on applications and such. The most recent state agency, the Office of Cannabis Management, is structured similarly with members to the State Liquor Authority, but it has members, or you can call them commissioners too. It really doesn't make too much of a difference. And it's structured very similar to the State Liquor Authority. So there's multiple people at the top that get to make decisions. And actually one of the most senior attorneys at the Office of Cannabis Management, I think, is a 2018 law grad Excelsior Fellow as well, to, again, champion that incredible program because it is just such an incredible program. So authorities have particular things that they can do. There's an authorities budget office, because authorities can borrow money in a way that government otherwise cannot because of the way that state government is structured. So there's lots of words, authorities, commissions, boards that people will hear. It's because every single state agency, unlike at the federal level, at the state level, in the governor land is structured differently. There are different structures. In many cases, you can take something like the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, which is appointed with a board, but it's gubernatorial appointments and legislative appointments. Some of these positions are Senate confirmed positions. Some of these positions are not Senate confirmed positions. I just looked on State Jobs NY, which is how I actually found out about the administrative law job position that I had. And they're currently hiring for the chief counsel for the office of, hold on, I'm gonna get this wrong, for OSAS, so the Office of Addiction Services and Supports, which is a pretty incredible opportunity for somebody who might be a little bit further along in their career. So I think one of the things that I hope people are getting out of this is that state government is actually really, really, really exciting in so many ways. I know because we all have sort of either litigation background of some sort or another investigatory background. As Candace mentioned, you get to do things right from the get-go in many positions. My Excelsior Fellows always were in court immediately, like the day they were sworn into the bar. It was a tradition at the State Liquor Authority that they go to court and get a chance to argue. which was a really cool thing to see, especially since a lot of times that doesn't get to happen the same unless you're in a district attorney's office. So I think in many ways, Mary, I think it's a historical interest that different agencies or authorities or commissions or boards are just made up differently based on when they were made up, what the dominating view of state government may have looked like at that time. And then the fact that that's changed too. And the fact that at DFS, you call it the chair, the head is the superintendent. And it's really the same as a chair at an authority. And so those words, while they're real fun, don't necessarily always have like real strict meaning specifically as to the different structures that exist in the executive.
That is so helpful. Thank you very much. And thank you for validating my feeling that I'm not the only one confused by all of this. Right? It is a little confusing. And so I'm glad that you shared that with our audience today. Abby, did you have something you want to add to that?
Sure. I actually wanted to add something to what two speakers have said. First, I wanted to provide more information about how the positions we have for attorneys at the Attorney General's office differ from what Abigail spoke about, in that they're not civil service positions. So you do not need to take a test. You do not need to register to be on a list to take them. They are not covered by a union. So it's a different scope of work here. And so they are at-will positions. It's a different beast. So the way you come by these jobs is also different. The best way to know what we have hiring is to check our website or to sign up to receive our emails. We do put them out on state jobs. And why? And they change, all the time with people leaving or new positions being created. So that's the best way to stay up to date with that, but you do not need to take tests. And then piggybacking on what Christopher was talking about, the AG's office has been very dynamic and is very responsive to what's happening in the real world. So it's not, I think sometimes state government has this ethos of being very stagnant. And while we are bureaucratic, we're not stagnant, and we are very responsive to the time. So after the murder of George Floyd, some things that came out of that were, we had an Office of Special Investigation, but through legislation, the scope of that changed, and it's now the Office of, it was the Special Investigations and Prosecutions Unit previously, and now it's the Office of Special Investigation, and it's actually a bureau that's become quite large, has a statewide presence, and their jurisdiction has shifted to be much more expansive, and they look at basically any deaths pretty much that are caused that involve police. And so that's one instance, as well as we have a law enforcement misconduct investigative office that was created through that same legislation. And then while I've been here, we've had other bureaus that have come into being. One of them is the Taxpayer Protection Bureau. So some of the bureaus come by way of changes in the law, but also some come by way of what's a priority for the person who's elected to this office. So I don't know, Abigail, if you see this with the comptroller as much, but there are certain priorities of the administration that are a focus. And so that might change where staffing levels are, or also positions that we created. For instance, before the legislation went into effect with the Office of Special Investigation and the Law Enforcement Misconduct Investigative Office, we hired an attorney to look specifically at hate crimes and to do some work in that space. So things change all the time in terms of what we're doing or what could be an area of focus, and it's very dynamic. And also in our state council work as well, which I think tends to seem a little bit dry to some people because I think they're more drawn to our affirmative work. They've had to be very responsive to all of the issues that have come out of COVID. So the matters that the attorneys have been working on and what's been an area of focus has shifted tremendously just by what's been going on in the outer world. So something to think about when you're thinking about a career in state government. So thank you.
That was really helpful, Abby. Yes, that's great. And also speaks just a little bit of what Christopher mentioned in terms of sort of the organization of government sort of changing over time and responding depending on history and events, right? Wonderful. Okay, I noticed, Abigail, that you put into the chat a link. Do you want to just say what that link is for? I too put in a link for our attendees.
Yeah, I saw it's just specifically to the legal specialties exam announcement, and you can just easily follow the instructions on that exam announcement.
Thank you for that. That's wonderful. Okay. Candace, did you have anything that you would like to add?
Yes, so I see a question about the Excelsior Fellowship. If fellows have come from outside of New York, law schools outside of New York, and the Excelsior Fellowship is unique for graduates of law schools from New York. However, if there are people in this group who have missed that window of time to apply for the Excelsior Fellowship, you have to be a student to apply for that fellowship. There is an Empire Fellowship program, and that's geared towards working professionals. So if you do have some type of experience, you can apply for that position or one of those fellowships. It's really geared towards those who want to refocus their career from wherever they are now to state government. So I can also find that link and drop it in there. And I don't believe you have to have any connection to a New York State school for that.
Very helpful. Thank you very much, Candace. Okay, so, and I should say to our attendees, if you have questions, please do use the Q&A and our panelists will be happy to answer them. Okay, so I am going to turn to what I'll call our lightning round towards the end of this program here, and ask our panelists, what advice do you have for students and young professionals who are interested in working in state government? And or how has working in state government helped you launch or progress in your career trajectory? And Abigail Sardino, I'm going to pick on you first.
Not great with the mute unmute button. So again, I can only really speak to my agency and more kind of agency jobs, because that's how I got started. I got on that legal specialties list, and even though I didn't end up getting my job through that eligible list, that I was on it for about a year. So I would, again, reiterate getting on that list. It's not difficult. It's a little bit time consuming, but it's pretty easy to get on that list. It's not like other exams where you have to wait for the exam to get to happen, which sometimes some of them only happen every like 10 years or something. So it's constantly available. So you just have to pay the application fee, which is I think $40, and you get on that list. And I had a few internships during law school with state agencies, and everyone that I worked with said, get on that list and take any job you can, because going in through this way, through the civil service list, and if it's a competitive position, it can be a little bit tricky because of the scoring. It's not like you can just study and ace a test. You're basically, it is what it is. Your experience and your education is what it is. So it can be a little bit frustrating to get into it, but once you're in, then if you're in a competitive position, like I said, you can laterally transfer. I think you have to be in your position for about a year, and then you can transfer to another agency much easier than that initial getting in part. And then, there's definitely room for advancement. Like I said, I'm in this non-competitive position where unfortunately you're kind of stuck if you're in that position. You can't transfer, you can't move up until you get into a competitive position. And my supervisors actually brought it up to me about just getting into my direct supervisor. Her competitive position is just sitting there, the line is open. So I can get into it. I just had to get on the list again as if I'm competing for it again. And then I can get into that position. So everyone that I've had in my experience is very, they want you to advance. I mean, if you want to just stay in the same position, you can, but, and some people do choose to do that because maybe they like being in that senior attorney position with the, you know, with being represented by a union and having that protection. So a lot of people will just stay in that position for a while. And like Abbe, I think, pointed out, you do get step raises. You get, with the union, you get they have like usually a 2% raise every year. So, I mean, it's not huge, but I know people in private practice who are actually like jealous of that, you know, like who maybe work for smaller firms who don't make that kind of maybe salary and the benefits that come along with the state. For me, it was like a lot of it was the public service loan forgiveness program and the benefits, the pension, the, you know, safety and security of having that and all the benefits that come along with it. A lot of paid leave and that kind of stuff, and good health insurance. Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks, Abigail. Christopher, I'm going to turn to you next because I know you have to leave us at 1:30 sharp. So same question, lightning round. Advice for students and young professionals who are interested in working for New York State government, and or how has working within the government launched your career?
Absolutely. And I will say this, you know, even as a former private practice partner in litigation, there is really nothing like being the head lawyer for a state agency, especially a state agency like the State Liquor Authority, which does not use the Attorney General's office. And therefore, right from the get-go, you are literally the lawyer. And you have a team of lawyers that you're managing, all mostly senior attorneys, just like Abigail was talking about, but there's a few appointed positions as well. And you are in state and federal court and doing Article 78s and emergency TROs basically every single day. You get a chance very early on to argue in appellate court. I worked on a brief at the United States Supreme Court on behalf of New York in conjunction with the Solicitor General and the Attorney General's office. And that was all at age like 30. So it's really incredible what you get to work on. And I want to emphasize what Abbe said. The work of state government is actually tons of fun. Like there's so many cool things that everybody here has had a chance to do. And so many amazing experiences that I think we've all had a chance to have. And I see it in the question and answer a question about what about older attorneys? And there's no question at all, especially through the governor's appointments office, that they are always looking for more seasoned attorneys, especially for more senior roles like counsels to particular agencies and other roles like that. And so it really is an incredible experience. And I would say, even though I now get to sit in this kind of really interesting position, which is why I have to leave at 1:30, I definitely am the first that would say that state government is the very opposite of not challenging and exciting as a lawyer. It is actually really awesome. And the things that Abigail gets to do as an investigative counsel are super, super cool. And the things that I used to be able to do when I used to go on raids as literally the chief liquor officer of the state of New York were incredible experiences. And so I highly encourage folks to, at any age, if there's something that seems of interest, get involved, because there's nothing like working for state government. It is a whole entirely different experience, and one that presents lots of very interesting legal opportunities and challenges, most often very early in one's career.
Terrific. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for being with us today. Candace.
Thanks.
Yes. So I guess my advice would be to take advantage of the civil service route, especially if you don't have a way of getting in through a fellowship. I thoroughly enjoyed my journey through the fellowship program. Part of the Excelsior Fellowship is that you go through a series of professional development sessions during those 2 years, and that really helped me have more confidence when I am appearing in front of senior staff and communicating with different heads of agencies. That really helped me. And also, I think once you do get into state government, it's important to realize that every attorney's experiences are different. As you can see from this call, we're all in state government, but we draw on different experiences, and some are litigating, some are not. And it's just, there's so many different opportunities in state government. So if you do get in and you don't like what you're doing, I suggest you continue to look within state government, because it doesn't mean that that's going to be your experience elsewhere.
That's terrific advice. Thank you very much, Candace, for sharing that. Abbe?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to a comment I made earlier, which is, when you work in state government, many times it's, the salary isn't going to be the motivator, right? You need to figure out what the motivator is. So are you motivated by social justice, promoting equal justice? For many of our attorneys who come into certain bureaus, they wanted to make the move into state service because they wanted to do more impactful work, or they wanted to have experiences that they weren't having in private practice. So whether that's going to court or other experiences. Others join particular bureaus because we have a number of bureaus that are nationally prominent. So whether it's environmental protection or antitrust or civil rights that are doing cutting edge legal work, and they want to work in those teams and they're more mission driven. That's what motivates them, and they want to have more of a work-life balance than perhaps they would have in a firm. So I think that it's important to think about what your motivators are and what's important to you, and allow that in some ways to guide the career decisions that you're making. And then, as everybody has said on this call, it's not a stagnant place. I think that state government people sometimes have this idea about it from wherever they've gleaned these ideas, and that's not what it is. I mean, we're doing impactful work that particularly at our office that you can feel, and it has a direct effect. And there are things that come up continuously. There are challenges every day. I don't do legal work, but what I do is tangentially related to being able to do what we do in this office by connecting talent to the positions that we have. And that's a motivator for me in my position, is how can we do better at getting attorneys excited and connected to these jobs? And so maybe you're not interested in litigating anymore. There are opportunities for JD Advantage positions in our office. We have several currently, including a director of legislative affairs. We're looking for a briefings and research coordinator that would work directly with the AG and her team. And we have a number of attorneys who are not practicing law, but who are impacting the work that we do on a daily basis, and the services and support we provide to New York. So.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Abbe. And so what I've done just now is, in addition to the link for the legal specialties exam and the civil service and the presidential fellowship, I just added a link to the State Jobs New York website for anyone who might be interested in looking there as well. So I want to say thank you to our panelists, Abigail, Candace, and Abbe. This has been such a pleasure and such an insightful and enriching conversation. I really appreciate the time that you took to spend with us today. And I look forward to seeing you again very shortly. And to our audience, thank you for being with us today. If you have any questions or want to be put in touch with any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out to me at Albany Law School, and I'd be happy to connect you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful Monday and rest of your week.